Commander Jack Thompson stood at the observation deck of Earth's orbital station, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. Through the reinforced glass, he watched another coalition diplomatic ship depart, leaving Earth's orbit in a flash of blue light. This was the 5th rejection this year. "They still think we're too primitive," he muttered, his reflection frowning back at him in the glass. The stars beyond seemed to mock humanity's attempts to join the greater galactic community. The Coalition's latest rejection message still played in his mind. While Earth has shown remarkable progress for its development stage, the Allied Species Coalition cannot accept members who rely on such unpredictable and emotional decision-making processes. A soft beep from his tablet interrupted his thoughts. The latest battle reports from the Coalition's war against the Swarm were streaming in. Jack pulled up the holographic display, and his heart sank as he read the numbers. 3 more Coalition worlds had fallen in the past week. The Swarm, a race of bioorganic ships that adapted and evolved during combat, was pushing deeper into Coalition space. Their living vessels learned from every encounter, developing countermeasures to Coalition weapons and tactics in real time. "Commander," Lieutenant Amy Rogers burst onto the observation deck, her boots clicking against the metal floor. "You need to see this." She handed him her tablet, showing live footage from the Battle of Proxima Station. The Coalition's perfectly ordered fleet formations were being torn apart by the chaotic movements of swarm ships. Their elegant battle algorithms, refined over centuries of warfare, meant nothing against an enemy that evolved faster than their computers could calculate. "Their logic is failing them," Jack said, watching as another Coalition cruiser exploded in a silent flash. "They're fighting with pure mathematics against biological instinct, and they're losing." "Sir," Amy hesitated, then continued, "I've been analyzing their battle footage. The Coalition always follows the most efficient, logical patterns in combat. But that's exactly why they're losing. The Swarm can predict and adapt to anything that follows a pattern." Jack nodded slowly. "Humans don't always take the most logical path. We rely on instinct, gut feelings, what the Coalition calls our primitive emotional responses." He smiled grimly. "Maybe that's exactly what they need." The observation deck's comm system crackled to life. "Earth Orbital Command. This is Coalition Admiral Reed, requesting emergency landing clearance. Priority 1 diplomatic mission." Jack and Amy exchanged surprised looks. A Priority 1 mission meant the highest level of urgency in Coalition protocols. "Permission granted, Admiral," Jack responded, straightening his uniform. "We'll meet you in Docking Bay 3. 20 minutes later, Jack stood face to face with a Coalition Admiral for the first time. Reed was tall and blue-skinned, with crystalline patterns running down his neck. A Lumerian, one of the Coalition's founding species. His normally pristine uniform showed signs of recent battle. "Commander Thompson," Reed's translator converted his harmonic speech into English. "The Coalition has made an error in judgment regarding humanity." Jack kept his face neutral, though his heart raced. "How so, Admiral?" "We believe your species' unpredictability was a weakness. Your reliance on emotion over logic, your tendency to take suboptimal actions based on instinct." Reed's large eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress in his species. "We were wrong. The Swarm is beating us because we are too predictable. Our logical perfection has become our greatest vulnerability." "And you think humans could help?" Amy asked, unable to hide her excitement. Reed nodded solemnly. "Your species thrives on chaos. You make decisions that defy logical analysis. The Swarm cannot predict what it cannot understand." He turned to Jack. "We're not just asking Earth to join the Coalition anymore, Commander. We're asking humanity to help lead our forces. We need your chaos to defeat theirs." Jack looked out at the stars, where somewhere the Swarm was advancing through Coalition space. Humanity had waited generations for this moment, but not like this. Not with the galaxy burning. "When do we start?" he asked. Admiral Reed's translator crackled with relief. "Immediately. The Coalition has already approved emergency integration of human officers into our fleet. We need your, what do you call it? Your gut instinct. And we need it now. Jack smiled. Humanity's greatest weakness had just become their greatest strength. Then let's show the galaxy what chaos can really do. The Coalition's Central Command Center buzzed with frantic activity. Holographic displays showed thousands of red dots, swarm ships, advancing through what was once secure Coalition space. Admiral Reed stood with Commander Jack Thompson and Lieutenant Amy Rogers, watching the invasion unfold. 3 more systems lost in the past hour, a Coalition officer reported, his crystalline skin dulled with stress. The swarm's new bioships are adapting faster than ever. Jack studied the tactical display, noting how the swarm moved like a living thing, flowing around Coalition defenses like water around rocks. They're not just adapting anymore, he said. They're anticipating. A new alarm blared through the command center. The main screen shifted to show a massive swarm fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel near Centauri Prime, one of the Coalition's most populated worlds. Impossible, Reed whispered. Our predictive models said they wouldn't reach Centauri Prime for another week. His hands trembled as he adjusted the display. There are 20 million civilians on that world. Amy stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Sir, look at their formation. It's different. She pointed to how the swarm ships were arranged. Instead of their usual organic patterns, they were moving in rigid mathematical formations. They're mimicking our tactics, Jack realized with horror. They've adapted so well, they can now use our own strategies against us. The room fell silent as they watched the swarm fleet split into perfect geometric patterns, exactly like Coalition formations. On screen, the defending Coalition ships tried to adjust their tactics, but their computer-controlled systems could only respond with pre-programmed maneuvers. Launch the automated defense grid, Reed ordered. The Coalition's pride and joy, a network of AI-controlled defense platforms, sprang to life around Centauri Prime. But the swarm was ready. Their ships morphed in real time, growing new organic armor perfectly shaped to deflect the automated defense's weapon patterns. What should have been the Coalition's last line of defense became another predictable failure. Get me Earth Command, Jack suddenly said. Now. Within moments, the face of Earth's defense director appeared on screen. Thompson, what's the situation? Sir, requesting immediate deployment of the experimental combat groups we've been training. All of them. The director's eyes widened. Those units haven't completed their full training cycle. They're not ready for. Nothing is ready for this, Jack interrupted, his voice firm. But those men and women are our best shot. They've been training specifically to fight unpredictably. After a tense moment, the director nodded. Approved. God help us all. Within hours, 50 small Earth ships dropped out of FTL near Centauri Prime. They were a motley collection of retrofitted vessels, each commanded by human officers with minimal Coalition technology integration. This is Captain Mike Baker of the Earth Defense Force. A new voice crackled over the command channel. We're here to help, but we're doing this our way. The Earth ships broke formation immediately, each moving in seemingly random patterns. There was no central coordination, no perfect geometry. Each captain was fighting on pure instinct and gut feeling. What are they doing? Reed asked, watching the chaos unfold. There's no logic to their movements at all. Exactly, Amy smiled. Look at the swarm. On the tactical display, the swarm ships were struggling to maintain their copied Coalition formations. Their adaptive algorithms couldn't process the random, emotionally driven decisions of the human captains. Every time they started to adapt to one human's tactics, another would do something completely different. A cheer went up in the command center as the first swarm ship exploded. Then another, and another. The perfect formations of the alien fleet began to break apart as they faced an enemy they couldn't predict. This is why you need us, Jack said quietly to Reed. Your logic and technology gave us the tools, but our chaos gives us the edge they can't adapt to. Reed nodded slowly, his earlier doubts about human unpredictability fading as he watched the battle unfold. Perhaps, he said, it's time for the Coalition to learn some chaos of our own. The battle for Centauri Prime wasn't over, but for the first time since the war began, the Coalition had hope. Sometimes, Reed realized, victory required embracing what you feared most. For the Coalition, that meant learning to trust in human unpredictability. Captain Lisa Walker stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Eternal Logic trying not to smile at the irony of its name. A month had passed since the Battle of Centauri Prime, and the Coalition was struggling to adapt to their new human allies. Captain Walker, her Coalition first officer, spoke up, his metallic skin reflecting the bridge lights. I must again object to this training exercise. It goes against all established combat protocols. That's exactly the point, Robert, she said, using the human name he'd chosen. The swarm beats us when we follow protocols. Today we're going to learn how to be unpredictable. The massive view screen showed 50 Coalition ships arranged in their usual perfect formation. These were the best crews in the fleet, now under human command for special training. Begin the exercise, Lisa ordered, just like we practiced. The Coalition crews had spent weeks learning what Lisa called controlled chaos, the art of fighting by instinct rather than pure logic. Now it was time to put it to the test. All ships, she broadcast, execute random pattern alpha. To the Coalition officers, random pattern alpha seemed like a contradiction, but as the ships began to move, breaking their perfect lines and scattering in seemingly chaotic directions, a new kind of order emerged. It wasn't the mathematical precision they were used to, but it had its own strange beauty. Ma'am, one of the Coalition sensor operators called out, the combat simulation drones are launching. Hundreds of drone ships appeared on the tactical display, programmed to mimic swarm behavior. This was the real test, whether the Coalition crews could maintain their controlled chaos under pressure. Remember your training, Lisa broadcast to the fleet. Don't think about what the perfect move is. Think about what feels right. Trust your instincts. The drones attacked in waves, their AI attempting to predict and counter the Coalition ships' movements. But there was nothing to predict. Each ship captain was making split-second decisions based on gut feeling, creating patterns too organic for machines to analyze. Robert watched in amazement as the Coalition ships, famous for their precision, danced through space like leaves in the wind. They spun and weaved, fired from impossible angles, and used maneuvers that would have been rejected by any tactical computer. He struggled to find the words, beautiful chaos. Lisa grinned. That's what we humans do best. We take chaos and make it work for us. The exercise continued for hours. Sometimes ships collided, shields sparked, and formations fell apart completely. But with each mistake, the crews learned something new. They were learning to embrace imperfection. Final wave incoming, the sensor operator announced. This would be the hardest test. A swarm of drones using actual captured data from real swarm ships. All ships, Lisa commanded, forget everything you know about proper combat. Show me what chaos can do. What followed was perhaps the messiest space battle in Coalition history. Ships rolled and spun in ways their designers never intended. Crews fired weapons at seemingly random moments. Some captains even deliberately missed their targets, creating unpredictable patterns of energy fire that herded the drones into killing zones. When it was over, the drone fleet had been completely destroyed. The Coalition ships were scattered across space in what looked like complete disarray. But they had won. Combat simulation complete, the computer announced. Casualty rate, 12%. Historical average against similar swarm tactics, 85%. A cheer went up across the command channel. Very unprofessional by Coalition standards, but Lisa let it slide. They had earned it. Captain, Robert said quietly, I believe I understand now. We've spent centuries perfecting our tactics, making them so precise that they became predictable. But humans, you embrace the unknown. You turn randomness into an advantage." Lisa nodded. "The swarm adapts to patterns, so we'll give them no patterns to adapt to. Each battle will be different, each tactic unexpected." She looked out at the scattered fleet, already reforming for another exercise. "We'll teach your people how to be unpredictable, and together, we'll show the swarm what true adaptation looks like." As she watched the coalition ships prepare for another round, Lisa saw the future taking shape. It wasn't the perfect, logical future the coalition had always dreamed of. It was messy, chaotic, and beautiful. It was human. And perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Tom Anderson wasn't a soldier. Until 6 months ago, he'd been hauling cargo between Mars and Jupiter's moons. Now he stood in front of the Coalition's top military engineers, trying to explain why they should turn mining equipment into weapons. "Look," he said, pointing to the hologram of a standard mining laser. "These things are designed to cut through asteroids. With a few tweaks, they could cut through swarm ships just as easily." The Coalition engineers stared at him with their various alien features showing universal skepticism. The head engineer, a tall being with crystalline skin, spoke up. "Our military-grade weapons are far more advanced than primitive mining equipment." Tom smiled. "That's exactly why this will work. The swarm keeps adapting to your advanced weapons, but they've never seen anything like this." He pressed a button, and the hologram changed to show his modifications. "Plus, we've got thousands of these sitting around in mining outposts. We can arm entire fleets in days instead of waiting months for new weapon production." In the back of the room, Commander Jack Thompson watched with pride. This was why he'd started recruiting civilian experts. They thought differently than military personnel, whether human or coalition. "Mr. Anderson," Jack spoke up, "tell them about your idea for the asteroid fields." Tom's eyes lit up. "Right. So you know how the swarm avoids asteroid fields because their bioships are vulnerable to impact. Well, what if we use modified mining tractor beams to throw asteroids at them?" The Coalition engineers burst into shocked murmurs. Using space rocks as weapons. It was so primitive, so crude, so human. "We've already tested it on a small scale," Tom continued. "A single mining ship can grab and throw rocks bigger than a swarm cruiser. Imagine what a whole fleet could do." One of the younger engineers, who had been working closely with humans, raised a hand. "The swarm's adaptive algorithms are designed to counter energy weapons and conventional attacks. They might not be able to adapt to simple kinetic impacts quickly enough." "Exactly." Tom pointed excitedly. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Isaac Newton is still the deadliest son of a gun in space." The meeting room's main screen suddenly lit up with an incoming transmission. It was Captain Lisa Walker, her face tense with urgency. "Commander Thompson, you need to see this," she said. "We just got footage from the Arcturus sector. The swarm is using some kind of new organic armor that adapts to our weapon frequencies in seconds." The screen split to show a battle recording. Coalition energy weapons splashed harmlessly off the swarm ship's constantly evolving hull material. Tom stepped forward. "Captain, what's the composition of that system's asteroid field?" Lisa checked her data. "Standard mix. Mostly nickel iron with some silicates." "Perfect." Tom turned to the engineers. "See, their fancy new armor won't matter if we hit them with 1,000 tons of rock moving at relativistic speeds." Jack watched the Coalition engineers' body language shift from skepticism to consideration. This was humanity's real strength, not just chaos and unpredictability, but the ability to find simple solutions to complex problems. "We can have the first mining ship converted within 48 hours, Tom said. "I've got friends in the belt who can help modify hundreds more. Just give us the word." The head engineer stood silent for a long moment, then nodded. "Begin the modifications. And, Mr. Anderson, what other primitive solutions have you been considering?" Tom grinned and pulled up another hologram. Well, you know those old cargo containers we use for ice hauling. I've been thinking about filling them with metallic powder and using them as space mines. For the next 2 hours, the room buzzed with ideas. Coalition engineers offered ways to improve the mining ship modifications, while Tom suggested more civilian equipment that could be repurposed. The barriers between human and coalition thinking began to break down. Jack stepped out into the corridor, smiling as he heard the excited discussions continue. The coalition was learning that humanity's greatest weapons weren't their guns or ships or tactics. It was their creativity, their ability to look at old things in new ways. The swarm thought it could adapt to anything. But how could it adapt when every human saw the universe differently, found new solutions where none seemed to exist? That was humanity's true power, not the strength of their weapons, but the endless innovation of their minds. The coalition capital world of Luminara burned. Massive swarm ships darkened the skies, their bioorganic hulls shifting and pulsing as they launched wave after wave of attacks. The coalition's orbital defenses, once thought impenetrable, crumbled under the assault. In the command center deep beneath the surface, Captain Lisa Walker stared at the tactical displays, her mind racing through centuries of human naval warfare. Besides her, Admiral Reed watched his homeworld burn. "Their numbers are too great," Reed said, his crystalline skin dulled with despair. "Even your human chaos cannot overcome such odds." Lisa's eyes narrowed as she studied the swarm's attack pattern. Maybe we're not being chaotic enough. She tapped her comm unit. "Get me Commander Thompson and Tom Anderson." Now, when their faces appeared on screen, Lisa didn't waste time with greetings. "Remember those history lessons about ancient naval warfare I've been studying? I've got an idea, but it's crazy even by human standards." "Those are the best kind," Tom grinned. Lisa pointed to the tactical display. "The swarm thinks they've learned to counter our unpredictability. So let's show them something really old. Something from Earth's age of sail." "What are you thinking?" Jack asked. "The breaking the line maneuver, used by Admiral Nelson at Trafalgar in 1805. Lisa's fingers flew over the controls, drawing the pattern. "We split our forces into 2 columns and cut straight through their formation. It was considered suicidal back then, just like it would be now." Tom whistled. "The swarms oriented all their ships broadside, just like old wooden ships used to do. They think they've got us pinned. But they've never seen this tactic," Jack finished, "because no advanced civilization would ever try something so seemingly primitive and dangerous." Admiral Reed stepped forward. "You want to divide our forces against their superior numbers. The probability of success is—" "Forget probability," Lisa cut in. "This is about audacity, about doing what they'd never expect because it seems too foolish to attempt." She turned to face Reed fully. "Admiral, your world is burning. Do we try it my way, or do we watch Luminara fall?" The silence stretched for a long moment before Reed nodded. "Give the order, Captain Walker. The fleet is yours." Lisa's voice rang out across all coalition channels. "All ships, form up into 2 columns. Earth pattern Trafalgar. I want modified mining ships with their asteroid loads in the front. Coalition cruisers with their newly installed kinetic weapons behind them. Energy weapon ships in the rear." She watched as the fleet reorganized, forming 2 long columns. The swarm ships maintained their broad formation, surely calculating that they had the coalition forces trapped. "All ships, full power to forward shields," Lisa commanded. "Prepare for close-range combat. We're going to get very personal with them." She took a deep breath. "Execute breaking the line on my mark." The command center fell silent. Even the coalition officers who had doubted human tactics watched in fascination. "Mark." The 2 columns of ships surged forward, heading straight for the heart of the swarm fleet. The enemy responded exactly as Lisa had hoped. They maintained their broadside position, expecting another chaotic human scatter pattern. Instead, the coalition columns plowed straight through the swarm formation. Mining ships launched their asteroid loads point-blank into swarm bioships. Kinetic weapons, far too primitive for the swarm's adaptive armor to recognize as threats, tore through their hulls. Energy weapons in the rear picked off any swarm ships trying to regroup. "Keep going," Lisa shouted as the columns punched through, splitting the swarm fleet into 4 separated groups. "Full turn. Cross their T." The coalition columns wheeled around in perfect synchronization, now able to fire their full broadsides, while the divided swarm forces could only bring a fraction of their weapons to bear. "Their formation is breaking," Reed announced, wonder in his voice. They don't know how to adapt to this. "Because they're fighting a battle from centuries ago," Lisa said quietly. "Sometimes the best way forward is to look back." The swarm ships began to retreat, their carefully planned assault shattered by tactics that predated spaceflight. As cheers erupted in the command center, Lisa shared a look with her fellow humans on screen. They had just proved that humanity's so-called primitive nature was exactly what the galaxy needed. Luminara was saved. And more importantly, the Coalition had learned that victory didn't always require the most advanced solution. Sometimes it just needed a history lesson and the courage to try something old. 1 month after the Battle of Luminara, Commander Jack Thompson walked through the Coalition War Academy's main training hall. The massive space, once filled with holographic displays of perfect battle formations, now looked very different. Human instructors stood at various stations, teaching Coalition officers things that would have been unthinkable just months ago. At one end, Captain Lisa Walker was explaining the concept of feints and false retreats. At another, Tom Anderson showed how to turn common space debris into improvised weapons. "Still getting used to the changes?" Admiral Reed asked, falling into step beside Jack. "Aren't we all?" Jack gestured to where a group of Coalition cadets were studying ancient Earth naval battles. "Did you ever think you'd see Coalition officers learning tactics from wooden ships?" After Luminara, Reed's crystalline skin sparkled with amusement. "I'd study Stone Age warfare if it gave us an advantage." They stopped at a large window overlooking the training grounds. Outside, Coalition ships practiced erratic movement patterns that would have been considered signs of system failure just months ago. "The swarm is retreating on all fronts," Reed said. "They've lost 6 major engagements in the past week alone. Our latest intelligence suggests they're struggling to adapt to our new, what did Captain Walker call it? Controlled chaos." Jack smiled. "Though some of our tactics are just pure chaos." A young Coalition officer hurried up to them, holding a datapad. "Commander Thompson, the results from the latest battle simulation. We achieved an 82% success rate using the human wolf pack strategy." Jack took the pad, nodding approvingly. The wolf pack strategy, based on Earth's submarine warfare, had proven surprisingly effective in space combat. Small groups of ships would hunt together, striking from unexpected angles before disappearing into asteroid fields or nebulae. "How are the Coalition crews adapting to the new tactics?" Jack asked. The officer's skin changed color with excitement, his species equivalent of a grin. "Better than expected. Once we understood that imperfection could be an advantage, everything changed. Some crews are even creating their own variations on human tactics." "Show them," Reed said. The officer activated a holographic display. It showed a recording of a recent skirmish where Coalition ships had combined their traditional precision with human-style unpredictability. They maintained perfect formation just long enough to draw the swarm in, then broke apart in calculated chaos, each ship following its crew's instincts rather than computer-plotted courses. "Beautiful," Jack murmured. "They're not just copying our tactics anymore. They're making them their own." The display shifted to show another battle. This time, Coalition ships used mining drones to create a debris field, then darted through it in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully coordinated. The swarm ships, trying to predict their movements, crashed into the debris instead. "We're calling it planned disorder," the officer explained proudly. "A mix of Coalition precision and human unpredictability. A commotion at one of the training stations drew their attention. Lysa was demonstrating an old pirate tactic, playing dead in space to lure in enemies. The Coalition officers, once horrified by such deception, now watched with keen interest. "The swarm is biological," Lysa was saying. "They think like predators. Sometimes, playing wounded prey is the best way to turn the hunter into the hunted." "How does it feel?" Jack asked Reed quietly. "Watching your perfect military embrace chaos." Reed was silent for a moment, watching his officers learn what he would once have considered primitive warfare. "It feels right," he finally said. "We thought advancement meant moving away from nature, from instinct. But humans showed us that true evolution means keeping what works, no matter how old it is." The Academy's alert system suddenly chimed. All eyes turned to the main tactical display as it showed a massive swarm fleet gathering near the Orion Nebula. "Looks like they're preparing for one last major offensive," Jack said. Reed's skin hardened with determination. "Then we'll show them everything we've learned." He turned to address the room. "All personnel, prepare for combat deployment. It's time to show the swarm what happens when precision and chaos work together." As the Academy burst into activity, Jack watched Coalition and human officers moving as one, no longer divided by their differences. They had created something new, a fighting force that could be both precise and unpredictable, ancient and advanced, planned and chaotic. The final battle was coming. And this time, they were ready. The Orion Nebula blazed with weapons fire. The largest swarm fleet ever recorded had gathered for one final push, their bioships filling the space like a dark cloud against the nebula's colorful gases. Facing them was the combined might of the Coalition human fleet, now transformed by months of shared combat experience. On the bridge of the flagship New Horizon *, Commander Jack Thompson stood with Admiral Reed and Captain Lisa Walker. The ship itself symbolized the new alliance. Coalition technology merged with human design philosophy, capable of both precise maneuvers and unpredictable combat. "All ships report ready." Tom Anderson's voice came through the comm. He commanded the modified mining vessel squadron, their holds filled with asteroids and improvised weapons. The swarm won't know what hit them. "Coalition battle computers are active but set to advisory mode only," Reed announced. "All crews will fight on instinct, using the computers as guidance rather than control." Lisa studied the tactical display, the swarms forming up in their standard pattern. "They still think they can predict us. Then let's show them how wrong they are." Jack opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, execute battle plan chaos." There was no better name for it. The Coalition human fleet burst into action, but not as a single unit. Instead, they split into dozens of smaller groups, each operating independently but working toward the same goal. It was organized chaos on a cosmic scale. The mining ships charged forward first, releasing clouds of metallic debris and hurling asteroids into the swarm's formation. The enemy's adaptive armor, designed to counter energy weapons, proved useless against simple rocks moving at relativistic speeds. Behind them, Coalition cruisers executed perfect maneuvers until the last second, then broke formation in ways their computers would have once called impossible. They darted through the debris field like fish in a reef, firing from angles that no logical battle plan would have considered. "The swarm's trying to adapt," Lisa reported, watching their bioships shift and change. "But they can't figure out our pattern." "Because there isn't one," Jack smiled. "Every ship is fighting its own way." The battle spread across the nebula. Some human ships played dead, luring in swarm vessels before springing their traps. Coalition squadrons used ancient naval tactics, crossing the T and breaking the line. Modified cargo ships released clouds of industrial chemicals that confused the swarm's organic sensors. "They're splitting up," Reed announced. "Their collective intelligence can't process so many different threats at once." The swarm fleet began to fragment. Their strength had always been in adaptation, in learning patterns and developing counters. But there were too many patterns now, too many different strategies to adapt to. Every time they evolved to counter one threat, 3 more hit them from unexpected directions. Now, Jack ordered, "Spring the trap." Hidden throughout the nebula's gases, hundreds of ships activated their engines at once. The heated plasma ignited the nebula's hydrogen, creating a cascade of fire that engulfed the scattered swarm ships. It was an old human trick, using the environment itself as a weapon. "Push the advantage," Lisa called out. "Don't give them time to regroup." The Coalition human fleet struck from all directions. Precision shots from Coalition gunners found weak spots that human instinct had identified. Improvised weapons from the mining ships tore through hulls that advanced military technology couldn't scratch. The massive swarm fleet, pride of their species, began to crumble. Ship after ship fell to weapons and tactics they couldn't adapt to, strategies too varied and chaotic to counter. Their perfect biological evolution had met its match in human unpredictability backed by Coalition technology. "They're retreating," Reed announced, his crystalline skin glowing with victory. All across the nebula, "They're running." The command deck erupted in cheers, human whoops mixing with various Coalition celebration sounds. Jack watched the swarm ships flee, knowing this was more than just a military victory. It was proof that progress didn't always mean abandoning the past, that strength could come from embracing supposed weaknesses. "Send word to Coalition High Command," Reed said formally. "The swarm is defeated." And he turned to face Jack and Lisa. "Tell them it's time to officially welcome humanity into the Coalition. Not as junior members, but as equals." As the nebula's gases swirled around their victorious fleet, Jack thought about the journey that had brought them here. The Coalition had sought to perfect themselves, to eliminate chaos and uncertainty. Instead, they had learned that true perfection lay in embracing imperfection, in combining order and chaos, old and new, instinct and logic. Humanity hadn't just helped win a war. They had helped an entire civilization remember that sometimes the best way forward is to accept that not everything needs to make perfect sense.